Well, now, there we go. How do you like that? This has now officially begun. Hello and welcome to the inaugural meeting of the 10100 idea. Joining us today, we have Laura, who is, and of course myself. And I am James. And so 10100 is a pretty interesting idea. And with regards to how do we start a worker cooperative. Um, and from that point, I don't really know where to go from there. So, where do you think we should go from here in terms of I have an agenda in terms of I want to get this off this idea. I want to give it a little bit more in terms of structure. I want to give it a little bit of a skeleton. Hopefully, through the process of inviting as much dialogue as possible, we can start to give this idea a little bit more flesh. And the more of us that gets together, the more that this idea might actually take in some wind and take on a life of its own, which is what I'm hoping. So I guess the question is, do you think that's a good idea? And how do we get there?
Just one note on technical stuff. Is there a way to boost the volume on, because I can hear you, just not very clearly. It's very quiet.
I bet you there is. Let me go into my audio settings. So now I've gone to automatically adjusting the volume. How does that sounding?
Same.
Is it still the same? How's that?
Yep.
Is that a little bit better?
Not really.
Hmm.
Now your headphones, is there a microphone? Because if you're connected with your headphones, if there's a microphone there, maybe moving it around closer to your mouth or something might help.
No, my headphones are plugged
Oh,
into
that's
my
better.
telephone. There you go. I knew we'd get there in the end.
Suddenly.
So, the 10100, 10 businesses, 100 people, comes together with around 10 people per business. Works out to be, say, one person per business to manage the business. On average, some businesses may require more than one manager. Some businesses may have more than 7 people in them. But let's just say that every business has on average one manager and 7 workers for it. And then we have 20 people left over to form the board and to form up the core administration that manages things like bookkeeping, accounting, legal, human resources, things like that. And that's the basic idea of the 10100. Becomes a worker-owned cooperative. So with that quick, brief overview, oh golly, Laura, how do we get this started?
You need people that want to start businesses that are interested in the idea. So first you need people that are that they have knowledge and experience and a passion for running a small business.
Mm-hmm.
You basically need to find 10 of them in 10 core areas, I would think. So if you're looking for who's looking to open a bar, that would be you, I think. Who's looking to opening like what you were saying, you were looking for like a small contracting business, or even find people that already own smaller businesses that are willing to shift from their basic, standard model into the cooperative. So it could be worthwhile reaching out to businesses downtown that exist, and talk to whoever's in charge there and see if they're interested in your model, whether they think it's a better one. So, and small businesses, I'm sure a lot of them might be interested. So just maybe write a list of the core types of businesses that you want for things to run? Like you wanted
Mm.
like a general store kind of
Yeah,
thing?
having like a department store, not just a, not
Yeah,
even like a general store actually. Now you think about it, because like general store is certainly um more frontiersy, I would think. You know, it's got more than just groceries. It also has like lumber and or farming implements or seed, that sort of thing, right?
yeah.
Um, and what I had in mind was something a little bit more suburban, in like having our own sort of like local Walmart sort of idea, or like Walmart-esque, or Giant Tiger, or something that would give us
Walmart for ethical people.
yeah, yeah, and it's something that would give us access to, as the 10100, as members of that, would give us access to group buying power. So, once a year we all decide that of the 100 of us, and all our friends and family that are a part of that, we're going to have maybe once a quarter, let's say, where we get to go into the department store and get first dibs on what we've just brought in um, for the next season, with regards to what we're putting out onto the floor, and we get the access to the items that cost plus 5%, and or maybe 10%, or whatever it is that we decide is enough to sort of cover um, uh, the the time of the people who are going to be there, their time, which of course was the $20 an hour, or the living wage. And then whatever we don't consume ourselves, we then turn around and sell to the rest of the community. And like that's a basic idea for there. Uh, and continuing out from there for all those businesses. Like I loved the idea of Curtis and I were talking the other day about having sort of like a taxi service or an Uber service for the peninsula, that afforded people, instead of having to go out and buy their own vehicles, they could just, if you're part of the cooperative, you can just throw a pip into the pot, and that goes to the fleet of vehicles that will be owned by the cooperative. So at that point, you can either have a cooperative vehicle, or you can hire somebody, hire a ride within the cooperative from somebody who has a vehicle, and we just all of a sudden we start our own little taxi service, or we incorporate an existing taxi service into it, and then we adopt a model where, for members, you just sign up and throw your pip into it once per month, and then you just get your rides as you need them. You just sign up and call them up, and someone comes up and picks you up. Versus then we can even open it up to the public at that point, and then we can either operate as a licensed taxi service and do something similar, and we can offer people options of paying like a flat service fee and getting, like, say, 5 return trips in a week for $50 a month, within a certain range or something. um, that sort of idea, and work out something so that, or even $50 a week, work out something. So I'm thinking of people who like work at Chapman's through the agency. They're always looking for rides and stuff. Well, we can do that. We can absolutely set it up so that we have almost like a consistent ride service. Um, and yeah, it's a great idea, but of course, where do we find the capital to fund an operation like that? Oh, wait, we use the 10100, because the 10100 is a vehicle for making
Yeah.
businesses like that.
So you've got
Um,
department store, bar, taxi service, maybe a courier service.
oh yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, because why not operate them as both? Offer it up to the peninsula, offer specific rates for discount times, for uh, like journeys from, like, say, Cape Croker to Owen Sound, or
Can you combine the taxi service and courier service?
yeah, sure.
Okay. Um,
I mean, think on our feet. We got
yeah,
one vehicle. We got two things that are going up the peninsula. One's a person, one's a package.
yeah.
Find them for the day. Why not?
Um, maybe an in-town. Well, I guess because it's harder to do bike. Because I'm thinking, because I was inspired sort of because a friend of mine in Toronto works for a bicycle courier service.
Mm-hmm.
So within town, have people send things around on bicycles, except that for the hills are a bit of an issue. Um,
Mm. But I mean,
but
if you're a biker, you figure out what the best, most efficient ways up the hills are, in the way
yeah,
that doesn't destroy you, and you figure out your day so that you don't have to do it multiple times. You figure out your routes. I would imagine. And on one hand, at least one way you're going to get down there really, really quickly with
yeah.
minimal effort.
There's also the um, yeah, you need to find like your 7 people that are the bikers around town would have to be willing to bike during the winter time.
Well, or just make it seasonal. And remember,
Yeah,
it's an average of 7. There are some
yeah,
businesses that are only going to be like 3 people, and some businesses that are going to be 14. And it evens out in the wash. And there are going to be some businesses that will sort of almost be like a blanket for several businesses or several operations within that business. Uh, the tattoo parlor. Okay. Have I talked to you about this one?
you mentioned tattoo parlor. Yeah,
Okay.
because you were saying that apparently they pay so much to the like most of their money that they make as tattoo artists goes into the business itself, and they take home very little themselves,
Yeah, it's
which
it's ridiculous.
sounds that's stupid. Yeah, definitely a better model for tattoo parlor is ideal. I was wondering about a mechanic
Oh yeah.
shop, because if we are running a taxi service, couriers and things like that, if we have a mechanic shop within the co-op, then that's a more economical way for us to maintain
Hmm.
uh, the bikes and taxis and any other kind of thing that we need for our businesses.
Yeah, and add to that used car lot. Get a couple of people who are interested in doing their own sales. Like, you need a
John would be
license.
good
No,
at that.
sorry.
John would be good at that
Sure.
because he
You need
fixed
a.
cars and stuff. He could easily, yeah, he could do some of that, but he could also work for the used car lot because he knows everything about cars.
I mean, yeah, you can know everything about cars.
He
The
can
question
tell
is,
you
can he sell
like
people
the
on them?
name of the founder of the company of a really obscure car that was in the lot that somebody sold him that's somehow vintage or whatever. Like he just, and then he would draw the original car, the first car off the line from memory. Like he'd
I
be perfect.
mean, it was a lot of fun. I'm sure he would be a lot of fun to have on the lot for something like that.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely. And well, the basic idea, because yeah, I have a this was an idea that and I should see if he's available. All these people that I think of, after the fact, he's
well, the thing with
probably.
John is that his data is used up and he doesn't have his own internet. So he's either going to come use my internet, but it's kind of gloomy and cold outside. So he could sit on the veranda. Um, Maybe there's a space heater he could borrow.
um,
We're not in a place where we can be like, yeah, come on over into the living room. That's because it's not, yeah, reasons. I would think we could add detailing, like car detailing and stuff to
oh
the
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So
so
that's
one
already
of the
5 businesses that are sort of like core.
Oh, so hold on, we're just even getting started. Like it's going to come down to which businesses do we combine so we can sort of get away with launching as much as we can, and with the idea as well that there are going to be 10 core businesses, but there's adjunct businesses as well that
Oh
are
yeah.
funded through And perhaps at some point here, it'll be really good to talk about some of the theory behind the 10-100, just kind of going over how all these different businesses would work. But real quickly, just with the car lot, with a shop, mechanic shop, one of the things that we would open up for members of the cooperative is if you want to use the shop space to work on your car in your own time, cool. It's not during business hours, after business hours. If you are certified to work with the tools, if you are certified you've gone through the training, we are confident that you are not going to destroy or kill you or anybody else. You can, so long as there is one of our licensed mechanics on site, use the bay to do your
Yeah.
hobby car or what have you, right? So that's one of the perks and benefits.
As long as with something like that, a lot of hobby cars, if they're taking it apart and they're fixing something up, they tend to leave them lying around. So as long as they
Hmm.
don't leave the car in the lot or like in the garage, in the dock kind of thing, well, like during business hours, because we
Yeah,
might need that particular dock the next day. So either it'd have to be like a way for them to like, okay, you can like tow it outside or something when you're done with it and tow it back in at night or something, or
sure.
if it's like non-functional kind of thing.
Yep.
But it's one of those things where it'd be like you can't leave it in.
Yeah, or you're doing a project over the weekend and stuff. And
Yeah,
yeah, so different uh, sure. But if you wanted to do your own oil change, hey, have at her.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
So
I
apartment
could,
store, bar, taxi service with a courier, a tattoo parlor, mechanic, used car lot, and detailing. Any other businesses that you can maybe think of? Just because if
oh
we write
golly,
down the type of businesses we're looking for, then we can put a list up. And just if somebody's like, "Oh, I was going to open one of those," then they might reach out to us to be like, "I'm in."
yeah.
Um,
So some sort of industry, like we don't. Do we have any trades stuff in there? We don't really.
we're gonna do contractors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which can be a catch-all for a whole bunch
Oh
of
yeah.
different things. So contractor, something industrial. Like, do we have anything that's like factory oriented or anything like that on there? Or
Uh,
agricultural as well. We should have a grow up at some point. Childcare business is going to be a benefit business that I hope will grow with the cooperative, so that as we have more businesses, childcare will expand and something we can open up to the rest of the community. We can apply for government grants, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea.
yep.
Hmm.
Contractors, childcare.
Oh, right. So the idea with the cars and stuff, in addition to the shop, in addition to going and having like a used car lot, and having access to the used car auctions and stuff like that. Wave of the Future, brainchild of Tyler, who I hope will join, um, is that we start uh, conversions from gas guzzlers to either hybrid or electric vehicles. And we start a conversion process starting with our own fleet of vehicles that we buy and that we turn around and sell as electrics, but also offer the service to people in the community. And you got your car that you like, cool, keep your car that you like, we'll convert it, you
Yeah.
know.
In
So
that case, maybe uh, charging stations. You can set
yep.
up a business of charging stations around town, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um,
And it could be one of those things where instead of individual ownership, we just have like the rideshare programs. Like I don't know if you've seen them in Toronto, where they have like Zipcar or um, I forget what they're called now, but basically it's everybody pays like 50 or I think it's a little bit more than that. It's like 200 a month or something, and that gives you access to the car for so much a month, and you just pay for mileage, wear and tear sort of thing. Um, and it's an interesting system. Might work in Owen Sound.
so our auto like our auto sector in this co-op takes up a whole lot of what we do, because we've got
I mean,
our
it could.
mechanic, car lock, detailing, oil to electric conversion, charging stations, zip car type business, taxi service, and couriers. And that is a lot for like that can be run under one roof.
That could be run under one business, like
Yeah.
half of those things. Yeah. And so that's just one business. That doesn't even. So you just need to get the right people who can manage the different aspects of that. The cooperative airplanes, trains, and automobiles section. And uh, and then just subdivide it into like other manageable things. And so long as it's making money, hey, what do we care? We'll fund it.
Yeah.
Just give us a return on our investment. And if it can't, if it consistently shows that it doesn't make a return on investment, well, then we either make changes or until it does make a return, or it goes away and we try something different. And there'll be like a process that's set up ahead of time that everybody understands and agrees to, and understands that if we go 3 quarters and we don't turn a surplus, last quarter is the last chance to show that we can make a trend or we can make a go of it. Now, that's assuming that the business is intended to turn a surplus. There are also businesses that would be like benefit businesses, where we're doing them not because they're going to make money, but we're doing them because that's what we want to do with our money. And so those are purely funded through our dividend structure. So those are going to be probably a little bit later on, more than at the beginning. And so perhaps it'd be a good time now to talk a little bit about the structure and stuff like that. But do you mind if I ask you to regurgitate what you've come to understand as the 10-100 model as sort of a starting point for me to understand what might be better or good to focus on?
So what I understand basically of it is it's the 10 people 100, apart from what we've already discussed in this particular video, that it's all democratically run. The managers are voted on by the staff,
Yep.
the people in it. A lot of decisions and board decisions and things like that are made. It's all like run democratically. Everybody's in it for everybody's sort of gunning for the same result kind of thing. Nobody's doing like if one person is doing well, everybody's doing well. There's no hierarchy or nobody's there won't have to be any strikes or things like that, because there won't be people complaining about we're being treated unfairly. Well, if you're treated unfairly, then everybody in the company is suffering, including the people in charge. So it's not like anybody gets a one-up on anybody else. And it basically covers a lot of basic needs throughout the community. The people within the 10-100 model would, I think what you mentioned something about paying a certain fee, a membership fee.
Yes, absolutely.
And that helps pay for the overhead costs and things like that of running things. Everybody gets paid living wage, plus dividends. Yeah, I think I've got a basic grasp of it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. 10 businesses, 100 people, all committed to basically funding and the running of those businesses. The way I conceived of it was like, how do I get my dream business up and started? And I figured it would take about 10 of us to run it, and if we could all afford to bring $1,000 a month to the table, we could fund it. But of course, none of us have $1,000 a month to bring. So However, at the time, I was gainfully employed, or recently gainfully employed, and so the idea of bringing $100 a month wasn't that big enough a deal. And so I thought, well, if I just got together with 9 other people who had also had dreams of starting businesses, and they all had their 10 people, more or less. Eventually, we'd all be able to collectively raise the right amount of money that we would need to start planting businesses, and we would just take turns planting our businesses. And it's since then I learned about Richard Wolff, who talked a lot about cooperatives, and this whole idea is sort of shaped into, um, yeah, we create a forum where businesses are proposed, and from there we get to see what these businesses are. They'll be costed out with the startup cost. They'll be costed out with the operating budget, what the ongoing costs are, how many people they need, what the labor costs, all of it, so we can see it up front what the projected costs are, and also get a feel for what the returns on those investments, what sales would be if it's a business that does contracting, what we can expect to get in terms of a profit margin. And of course, we would need somebody who's a lot more qualified to speak to how a construction or a contracting business works. But I can at least speak to some but of how like a restaurant would operate, or at least a bowling alley, an entertainment business sort of thing, and also seeing how other businesses run. It all seems to basically be the same sort of principle. You have something that somebody wants, and you charge them money for it. And that's relatively simple. We just need to get ahead of the game. So to do that, uh, we make those business proposals, and we all come and we say, I like that business. I like that business. Not so sure on that business. I'm not going to sign up on that business, but I will support that business. And what we're signing up for on the other side of the list is to support these those businesses, the 10. Um, and once we get a 10 that 100 of us can all agree on, that we will all support, and there's at least one business that we are committed to as far as I will work hours at that business. I'm not just okay with working alongside that business, but I actually am invested in a business that I will go and work at. um, and we got 100 of us, then we incorporate. We will then bring our $100, and we do this monthly, uh, where those $100 that will become the pool of capital from which we will then begin to start the businesses from. And each business will have a price tag associated with it. So there will be some businesses that will obviously we are not going to do first, because they to start them, it's going to cost about $1 million in terms of startup fees and legal and equipment and location and labor. It's a big operation. We're going to do that one later. But there's going to be some, and we'll talk hopefully a little bit about the idea of the tattoo parlor, which and how quickly that gets started up, and how quickly that also makes money, thus turning around and investing in the next series of businesses. And we keep doing that until sort of on that exponential curve, where the first business invests 90% of what it generates back into the capital fund, and then only 10% goes off to dividends. So for the first business, our dividends are going to be worth nothing at all, pretty much. It's going to be worth pennies. So it's not that big a deal. But as we grow, and as we get to the point where we have 8 or 9 different businesses, or all 10 businesses up and running, plus all other adjunct businesses that are also surplus driven, our dividends are going to be worth something quite a bit, because pretty much 90% or 100% of what the businesses generate is no longer going into the capital fund, because the capital fund has served its purpose. It's now all going into the dividend fund, and from there, We then get into the really fun part of the 10-100, and that is the benefits, where we have such visionary ideas as things like the debt buyback program or the housing program, or to create a venue to allow new ideas to come forward, such as, say, you want to put on a music event. Is it going to make money? Don't know. If it does, A. If not, doesn't matter, because we funded it all using our dividend shares that we generated through working. So let's talk a little bit about that. Because we've talked a little bit about before about how it would be nice if everywhere we worked paid us a living wage, because minimum wage rate at the moment is what, 14.50, something
14.
ridiculous. Is it just 14 flat?
14.
Jeez, that's not a living wage. And
It's almost a living wage, and then like the issue too is that whenever a lot of businesses feel like inflation goes up whenever the living wage goes up. So the issue isn't just a question of living wage, although we do fine because we don't we're not losing money by paying people more because we've got a better model. Other businesses, like when government mandated living wage on everybody, then all the businesses are like, oh, I can't afford to pay my staff because I don't charge enough for my products. And it's like, actually, if you waited a couple months for everybody to be able to make more money, more people would come in and shop and you'd sell more stuff and then you'd make the money back. But nobody seems to understand that, so inflation goes up because they think they have to. So every time the government says increase minimum wage, inflation does its thing and everybody's maintains the same level of I can barely afford to pay for things. So if we're working on a model that offers a living wage outside of the basic system, it's not like the major companies are going to look at us and be like, we can't afford to pay our staff because you're making living wage. Like we can operate with living wage within our model and not necessarily have to worry about outside inflation going up because of it, which is yay.
well, and the other idea is like, if even if we all agree to like, because I've been thinking, I thought a lot about this at the beginning, like, do we just start with the minimum wage, and because if we do that, then the dividends become a lot bigger. And let me tell you, the tax that you get taken off of on dividends versus the tax that you get taken off of on your hourly paycheck is big difference for the first 30 grand or so. It's ridiculous. But I think for the
At that
first,
point, it would be a question of servers minimum wage, where they're not really making enough with what they're actually getting paid by their employer,
because
but
they survive
they're
on
making so
tips.
much in tips. So our version would, if we were working with what the existing minimum wage, we would be, our dividends are basically the equivalent of the tips that servers make.
Yeah, but everybody gets that tip
Oh yeah,
at the end of the month.
everybody gets that, and yeah. So it's a question of, yeah, at this point, as long as everybody's making enough to live on, because as far as I would prefer in the beginning to be making a living wage, and
Yeah,
then
especially
have
when the
the
dividends
dividends
aren't going to
be
be worth
extra,
much.
even if it's just pennies. But you do make a good point with the taxes. So if you're making a living wage and you're getting taxed back into poverty, then maybe shifting it to dividends to make up the difference would
But no,
be.
you won't get taxed back into poverty, because that's not how the tax system works. Because you only start paying more tax once you make over the certain amount, and you only get paid that. It's not retroactive. It's only on the new
Oh, okay.
amount that you
Well,
pay into.
then we might as well just keep it at the $20
Yeah,
and make dividends icing on the cake.
and in fact, uh, like uh, yeah, I say $20 because it makes the math super easy, for me in my book. But then again, understanding that $20 an hour isn't $20 an hour; it's more like $25 an hour. Because I remember learning that $15 an hour was actually more like $19 an hour when you factored in what the employer pays, or
Yeah.
uh, you know. And so, starting with that premise that if we're paying $20 an hour, that the business itself is going to be paying 25, well, that's great. That makes math incredibly easy all around, and very easy to visualize how this all works. So uh, the way I visualize it, every shift in the cooperative is going to be 4 hours. So whenever I talk about a shift, it's 4 hours. Now you might have 2 shifts consecutively together for a typical 8-hour shift in a day. Cool. I would imagine that makes sense in a lot of cases. Not in every case. Like certainly as a server, you're probably familiar with like split shifts and all that other great stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are, sometimes those are nice. Sometimes those, give you a bit of time during the day to do what you want to do. Sometimes they're annoying as all get out. I don't know. I've never really, I've maybe
Having
done
worked that kind of shift thing, I did
not
enjoy
long.
it's not
Yeah,
long. So if it's really busy and you're run off your feet kind of thing, and you're working for 4 hours in a place where, like, as long as you know what time you're getting off work,
mm,
um, then you know that you only have to put up with it for like 4 hours. So it's like, if you have a stressful day and you're dealing with the public sort of thing, then at 4 hours you get to go home and relax, or you get to do whatever, you're off before the bank's closed. Um, or any other business sort of thing you want. The only issue there that I ever ran into was when I was working as a server in places, I wasn't always making enough money to like do anything with my downtime.
which
Um,
sucks. Yeah.
yeah, especially during quieter seasons, because I was making a server wage and tips, and therefore it'd be like, yeah, I have this extra downtime to go do things, and I was living my life and sort of enjoying certain things, but there were other things that like I couldn't afford to, like go to a restaurant or something, or like even go to the bar after work and like buy a pint necessarily, because I needed that money for other things, for bills and whatnot.
Hmm.
But so that's one of those things where it's like, especially I think with serving in restaurants and things like that, because a lot of people don't realize just how stressful it is to work in a bar kind of
Yeah.
situation. Especially if you're working on tips, but we wouldn't be doing tips necessarily.
No, and in fact, again, the principle is everybody gets paid the same hourly wage. So
Yeah.
if you are a board member and you're sitting on the board and you're doing board business, um, you're getting paid the same as the dish pig, same as the I don't know if that's an appropriate phrase. That's what we used to call ourselves,
Yeah.
or or the person who's selling cars, or the person who is blah 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 blah.
So that takes away a lot of stress right then and there. Because when I worked at the Avalon when it first opened, um, I didn't have to worry about tips, which meant that if one of the customers was coming in and was trying to be like, oh, I get to be mean to you and you have to put up with it because you rely on me for your living, which they
Mm,
do. Like, bullies are attracted to restaurants in that way. You get a lot of
ooh,
people, but you really do. People come in and they figure you're a servant because, if you don't please me, you don't live well enough. So,
right?
kiss my ass. With that lifted off the shoulders, if somebody came in that thought that they could get away with that kind of thing, we wouldn't have to, and if we didn't feel like we wanted to serve that table anymore because they were being rude or whatever, we could just say, I'm sorry, I'm going to send somebody else to deal with you. I'm going to send the manager over, or the owner of the restaurant, and you can talk to him, because I don't need your tips. I don't
Yeah,
have to put up with this. I'm out.
yeah,
Um, and that, even knowing that wasn't a thing, lifted so much like stress off
yeah,
shoulders of the staff, because they didn't have to, if you were having an off day or something, or maybe like and that's the other thing too, when you're a server, you can't necessarily afford to take time off work.
yeah,
So if you're, somebody in your family dies, or, you have to go to work anyway,
Hmm.
So if you're having a day where you're like, you can't handle what's going on because you're dealing with some other emotional trauma or something like that, you're still whatever, then like, you're going to get crap tips that day because you're trying to force a smile and pretend like everything's fine. And people are going to notice that you're not functioning properly, you're forgetting things, you make mistakes,
Yeah.
and there's no room for being human in the tip system.
And the whole point of the 10-100 is to celebrate being human. And in fact,
Yeah.
the way I've envisioned it is, I would love to have a scenario where where once a month, and this is the way I initially envisioned it, because once we have the 100 people all come together, and we have the 10 businesses that we're all going to fund, that we all agree to. The first month we come together, bam, we got 10 grand in the bank. We've elected the president, we've elected the treasurer, the secretary, or the chair, whatever it is. However, we set up the structure. I personally like the idea of using Starfleet ranks, so we can elect the captain and the commander, and then the lieutenant commanders. You know what I'm talking about. There we go. And um, may or may not work out. I've actually, on a complete side note, I've actually thought about the uh, how the 10-100 would operate, as far as um, in addition to the 10 businesses, you of course have the core administrative business. And one of the selling points of the 10-100 is that we lift off of the entrepreneurial minded the need to be able to be good at bookkeeping, the need to be able to good at legal, the need to be good at human resources, the need to be good at advertising and marketing, the need to be good at all these different things. We take it off the entrepreneurial minded, and we just give them a pool of capital and a pool of labor and say, make it work. you know um, and we'll make the rest of it, operate. You just give us the figures, the bookkeeper will figure it out. We'll make sure everybody gets paid at the end of the week. We do payroll. The only thing you need to do as a manager is just keep track of the business, manage the business, set the hours, buy the supplies, set the schedule, set the tone, the flavor. If this is a contract business, uh give the quotes, and then your laborers, they're owners as well. As far as I'm concerned, the laborers are responsible for making the work environment the most amazing work environment you'd ever want to go to ever, as well as the most amazing environment that you would ever want to come to as a customer. As a manager, you're responsible for making sure that the business exists, so that both the laborers and the customers can come together and make the magic happen. And then the board is responsible for making sure that it's all turning a surplus. And so they work with businesses, with the managers, and with the laborers in order to make sure that this is all turning a profit at the end of the day, or a surplus, and that this is going to, at the end of the day, not just pay us hourly, but pay us dividends, because that's what this is all for. Um, so everybody gets an hourly wage. So you work for a business, one of the cooperative businesses, you get paid $20 an hour because it's easy. Um, we haven't really talked about dividend shares, or how they, other than referencing them. But the idea is that anybody who helps the business generate revenue should get rewarded for that. And that's the basis upon which we disperse dividends. So anybody who works a shift, remember that's 4 hours. So you pick up one shift at a cooperative business within the work week, you get paid, in addition to $20 an hour, $80 for that, for your shift. You get a dividend share. You generate a dividend share that's yours for that work week. If you work full-time hours, which I'm up in the air. Sometimes I think it's 40 hours a week. Sometimes I think 36. But then 36 creates the awkward half shift, which is always fun. So that's something to try and figure out. But yeah, maybe that's all right. But at least 40 hours a week, it would be full-time hours, and you would earn a second or another dividend share if you were managing. And I'll talk a little bit more about how management works and what's involved in that. But pardon me, uh, if you were to manage a business, then that would, before you even started to work that week, you would get a dividend share, because I would like to recognize that managing a business is a lot on somebody's shoulders, and taking on the responsibility of making sure that the whole enterprise runs is a lot. So well done you. Here's a dividend share. Uh, do well, and you will be paid well. you know. Uh, and that I think is part of the beauty of it, is in the incentivization structure as well. Is like, uh, even though there are multiple ways to earn dividend shares, and I'll get to a few more here in a second. um, those shares are only worth something if we are really doing well as a cooperative. If we're only just breaking even, our dividends are not going to be worth that much. It's when we do well as a business that our dividends are going to be worth something, which I think is as it should be. The way it is currently, we get paid hourly no matter what. We show up and we get paid, assuming there's money in the bank, and then the boss gets to keep it all. you know, um, which is fine, and that's the capitalist system. And this way, so okay, so bunny trail aside, rant done. Uh, the other way that you can generate, or that I've conceived of as generating dividend shares, is through sales referrals. Laura, let's say you have a friend who we've got our tattoo parlor that I mentioned earlier up and running, and there is somebody out there that is a friend of yours that's going, oh golly, I wish I could have a tattoo, and you go in, aha, I have, and you present them a business card with a little QR code on it that you've pre-scanned, uh, so that it's now, that QR code is now registered to you, and it entitles the bearer of this to 5% off whatever our business is at one of our businesses. So you say, take this; they'll give you a 5% discount on your tattoo, and which is great. So she goes in, and a 4-hour session, by the way, is typically $650, according to my tattoo artist friend. So 5% discount on that is, I can't do the math off the top of my head, but it's nice. It's a nice discount, and it's still well within our profit margins, because the 4 hours that the tattoo artist is working on that person, the tattoo artist is getting paid $80 the hour for that, and the business is paying an extra 20 over top of that. So yeah, the rest of that is gravy. That's pretty good. So we can give them a 5% discount, and you all of a sudden get registered as having generated revenue for the cooperative. Well done, you. You now get another dividend share. Now, here's to keep people from abusing the system, we're going to cap the amount of dividend shares that people can generate in a week up to 5. So you can refer 12 customers. You're still going to get a maximum of 5 dividend shares in that week. Spread your friends out. Don't send them all at once. But or strangers. And my hope is that with all the extra disposable income we all got, we're all going to be going out and spending our money and being a lot more gregarious and looking for more people to send to our cooperative businesses, so as to generate A, pips, and B, more money. so
Yeah.
um, and I mean, and the money by itself is kind of immaterial. Well, no, it's very immaterial, but which is the point, because then we get to turn around and turn those dividend shares into either a big paycheck that we cut to ourselves once a quarter, or that we can then turn around and reinvest in different benefits that the cooperative will be providing, things like childcare, things like I want to say medical benefits, what do you call it, drug benefits, having a drug plan, having full dental, having eye care, having all of the benefits that we always dream of getting. Well, we're going to fund them through our dividends. And we're going to do that once a quarter when we get together to get an update as to how the cooperative is doing, what the businesses are, uh, what our dividend shares are worth, and we can also then take care of any business if there's any thing we need to vote on. If our capital fund has gotten to the point where we have $500,000 in the capital fund now, do we want to open the recycling plant, or is now the time when we buy a fleet of vehicles and start our Uber service, or what do we do now? Or is now the time we start Flagons and Dragons? Because 500 grand would go a long way to making my restaurant become a reality, So, so we take care of the voting, and then we find out how much the shares are worth. We also find out people who have adjunct business ideas can present their ideas to the assembly, and we vote on them. If they get 50%, they will get access not to the capital fund but to the ongoing operations fund. And I should probably talk about how that works here at some point as well. We'll get to that in a minute. Um, or if it's not for profit, it'll just be run out of the dividend shares, and so people can, instead of cashing out, because after a certain point, yeah, you can cut yourself another check, but we're being paid a living wage, and B, this is the vehicle for us to fund projects that we've only ever dreamed of being able to do, and be them art projects, or uh, even I was saying to a friend of mine, you could start under this model, you could create a little side business where for 8 hours a week, it's your job to go out and walk through nature and take pictures. Wouldn't that be awesome? Your job for 4 hours a week could be to stream to YouTube. I mean, wouldn't that be cool? Or to Twitch or something like that, and you get paid $20 an hour because you would be paid through the dividend shares. And your budget would include what it costs to pay somebody for 4 hours to go and take pictures. And you can set that up for 4 hours a week, for 4 hours a month, however many times, and then just you can keep dropping in your dividend shares until, and maybe your friends can drop in a dividend share or something into it as well. I mean, that's where the real politics of true democracy come into play, where you can say, "I'll come over and help you at your place if you'll put one of your dividend shares into my little, side photography business," or whatever. And then when it comes to your work week, you just, one of your businesses is, or one of the things you do is you go out and you take pictures for 8 hours a week, or for a day, or you go and you stream the Twitch or to YouTube or something, and
YouTube videos.
yeah, right. And it would be really interesting to get. I've often thought about reaching out to people like David Dole or Christio Avalis, and to say, hey, would you guys consider working part-time for this? We'll pay you $20 an hour, and for every hour of content that you create, you can get 3 hours of prep. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And your now $20 an hour job is now doing this, and just promote the cooperative. We'll pay you, and by the way,
Yeah.
welcome to the
This show
cooperative.
is sponsored by my employers. by the, the cooperative, the 10-100 cooperative.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally bring in people like that and just sort of make them as sort of like adjunct businesses that that would just promote what we're doing, and not just that, but also promote the idea, because uh, with this idea, Curtis was asking me the other day, like, how big do you see this getting? And he's thinking, like, you say to 100, but are you thinking thousands, millions? I'm like, good question. I think the better case scenario is to keep things to as close to a 10-100 as possible, but then to allow for other 10-100s to pop up and exist. And then we can all sort of like, if we can create a framework where we all buy into like the same, medical benefits, or the same dental plan, or the same whatever, we'll get the benefit of having 1,000 people on like a group insurance plan. So the cost comes down exponentially for everybody. But we aren't dipping our hands into each other's pockets. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
um, and to help facilitate that, we could even like require that if you're going to be a member of the 10-100, we won't make anybody sign a non-competition clause, because that's dumb. But we could have in a sort of thing where it's like, uh, we won't have 15 or 15 shoe shops trying to vie for the shoe market at Owen Sound, from 15 different 10-100s. We'll try to, and I'm sure much smarter people than me have already figured out what demographics and things look like in terms of how many stores can an area actually handle, like that there's demand for the product that we'd be selling, and then figure out a way to make sure that overlapping 10-100s don't um, step on each other's toes. But then again, maybe that's an entire fool's errand, and the best we can do is say, okay, well, if you're going to be part of the 10-100 framework, these are the basic principles, and we all get into we have collective benefits through insurance, stuff like that.
There's
But
nothing necessarily wrong with competition too,
yeah,
because
and then
it
yeah,
can drive market values down. Part of the reason that certain things cost more than they need to, like diamonds, is because it's all owned by one dude. It's
monopolies. Yeah,
monopoly. Yeah, we definitely don't want monopolies, and or even like price fixing and all that other stuff. Like that's all not cool. But
mm,
it happens, and that's part of the reason like the cost of living is so high, is because of all the the corporate corruption, either price fixing or monopolizing every single freaking thing in our lives. So if there is another 10-100 based cooperative, and they have another shoe store that's in competition with our shoe store,
yeah,
it's not
cool.
necessarily a bad thing
Yeah,
from a more economically democratic way of looking at it. Even if we lose out in the long run, it might end up being okay.
that's
So
business.
what do we do? Yeah, what do we do to improve? What do we do? How do we fix this kind of thing? What are they doing, etc.? And it's another sort of incentive. And as much as monopolize, they like the idea of monopolizing, because then they don't have to think that much about it, and they can run really crappy businesses.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, right.
and you wonder why services are so expensive yet kind of crap. It's like, because they don't have to be better. They're not fighting against anybody else for quality or service or anything. So here you are dealing
Mm,
with these companies that are just kind of like, well, this sucks. It forces people to be better to their customers and better as businesses. So as much as it does make our jobs harder, it makes our jobs harder for a very good reason. So I'm personally, from an ethical standpoint, okay with another 10-100 being in direct competition, and like maybe stepping on our toes a little bit, because that just drives us to be like, okay, how can we do better?
so what
How are we
happens?
better to our customers? How do we get them to come to us then?
So what happens when like how large is the labor force in Owen Sound? We know the population is approximately 20,000, but how many of that is actual like of age labor force out working or could be working?
That's definitely something to look into. I'm sure the stats are online somewhere.
Yeah. I'll make a note of that. Demographics. Um, uh,
Because that's another thing too. Is there's so many people that are losing jobs because the factories all left, and where do they go? And
yeah.
gee, I wonder why the drug problem in Owen Sound is getting worse. You know,
Right.
like here are these people that had full-time jobs for so
Don't know
many
what
years,
you're talking about.
and then they're like, well, I can't. I've never worked retail or all these other things, but I'm not qualified for anything else, and I don't necessarily have savings to go to school, and next thing you know, they're homeless. Um,
Right.
so there's plenty of employable people out there
Yep.
that we can catch before their lives completely fall apart. And especially right now with everything sort of going haywire, and there will be some small businesses, unfortunately, that lose out because of this, because they can't open their doors and they can't whatever, and so there will be more unemployed people. Some of those people can have my job. Don't tell my boss. I
Right.
just don't
Right.
like working because I'd rather work for the 10-100.
Right.
So we'll trade. You
Right.
can go home there and all.
Or even better, we'll start buying up because like that's the other avenue in this is to um part of me was like wondering if part of the 10100 movement should be just to be creating a website where you create basically a virtual whiteboard with like a list of businesses on one side and a list of people on the other. You can sign up via Facebook, so you got the social interaction right there. You can tie it to Google Maps so you can put it through a geographical location, make it via zip code or postal code. Um, and
we definitely need a website, and we definitely know somebody who can make us a website.
yes, and I asked him if he would join, but I don't know if he got back to me. Hold on. Oh dear. Something is unhappy and chirping at me. What is Zoom?
We need to make a handbook too. I mean, like
Yes.
that's definitely something to include, but like write a rundown of how it works. I've been taking notes.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
you'd be best to write down the basic model, but I've got a list of the I've got the
I'm
dividends,
making notes and stuff.
yeah, diagrams and all kinds of other things, and put it together into a book. Because that's something else that we can do once we get this figured out.
Mm-hmm.
Book publishing. Oh, I'm gonna add that to the list too.
Or see if the Ginger Press is willing to join in, and that's the other idea as well. One of the I think we talked about it, but I'll just mention it now. One of the strategies for potential growth within the 10100 is creating an opportunity for people who are currently sole proprietor owners um, to uh, to be able to integrate their existing business into our
If we find
100.
enough people to do that, then we can fast track the launching of this entire enterprise. Because if we find people around town that already like the Ginger Press, that already have businesses that want to integrate,
Mm-hmm.
we've already got an established business that already knows how to run itself, etc., that wants in.
So
Um,
typically, what we would probably do is buy the business out from, or buy the owner out. So there would be two ways of doing it. One is where we just give them the cash equivalent or the cash amount of what their business is worth, and then they become a member like everybody else, and they may or may not be elected the manager. Who can say? But that's all they got is the cash. The other way is that I would offer them a permanent PIP. So every work week, a PIP is generated for them because they've brought in an existing established business that presumably turning a profit, or could if it was funded and didn't have debt over top of its head. So we buy out the business. We figure out the debt because we're a capital making machine, and so that's the cost. We just get rid of it, deal with it. I was going to say the other thing we could do is, instead of offering the full cash amount or what the business is worth, offer them a discounted amount. So with the dividend PIP, the permanent dividend PIP, in lieu of the full cash amount. So if they're smart and they catch hold of the vision of how this whole thing works, I mean, that would be the way to do it for my money. But then again, I'm biased. Um, yeah, I was thinking about my friend, or our mutual friend Tony, whose parents own the graveyard business, right? And well, his dad wants to retire, and Tony doesn't want to run it. His sister doesn't want to run it, so they're sitting and going like, "Well, who's going to run this?" You know? And I'm like going, make it a 10-100 business, you know?
Yeah.
Then you don't have to, because Tony doesn't want to run a business, but he could manage it. He could set the hours. He could order the stuff that it needs to run it, and the people who are working there, they could become owners, you know, and they can work for it. They'll get paid $20 an hour. I don't know if that's a raise or a cut for some of them, but they'll get dividends, and their dividends will not just be from that business alone. It'll be from that business plus all the other businesses. And
Yeah, and like there are people like, so you're talking about people that maybe inherited a business they don't necessarily want to run themselves.
yeah, or they need
Maybe
help.
people want to run it and they don't know how, or they just don't want to run it. They're like, I inherited this business from my family. It's run, it's established, it's good. I
Yep.
hate it. Because like the reason that furniture store downtown closed, because the guy who ran it inherited it from his parents, ran it for years, hated it. He
Yep.
was never interested in running that business. It made him money and whatever, but he hated it the whole time. And it's like, if you could then make it part of the 10-100, you could keep that established business open and still
Yeah.
be generating money from it, but you could be working somewhere else. You
Yeah.
could, hand the mantle over to somebody who is interested
Yeah.
in running that business and go join another one of the businesses that are part of the 10-100, and just
Yeah.
boom, there you go.
Yeah.
You could do whatever you wanted at that point and not be stuck. I have to do what my parents did because it's been handed to me, and here's this money, and I'd be stupid not to take it, but I hate my life. Because
Yep.
that's I get it. Like, not everybody shares the same passions as their parents.
No.
So,
No. Oh golly, boy, am I learning that the hard way. Anyway, none of that.
but that would give them a way out, and that would give us another business to absorb.
Yeah.
That is already established and generating. So yeah. So
Yeah, and then once a month, everybody would come, even the new people coming. Weekend, everybody brings $100 a month, and that becomes a pool of capital, and that's ongoing. You know, membership is ongoing, and eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to pay that with just our pips. You know, so like, you just put a pip into the pay my dues for the year sort of thing there, and it just kind of gets set aside, and that's then the capital. You know, the capital fund. Um, Pardon me. Oh golly, I get so excited when I think about all this stuff, you know, about the potential for it is. So let me walk through while I'm thinking of it, how how the businesses are funded and how this all works, because it's a little fluid right at the moment, but in basically it's all based on quarterly operations, right? So uh, Hmm. How do this is such a knotted um, dough of bread, it's difficult to figure out where to start. Where's the beginning of a pretzel?
All the more, there's
Um,
all the more reason for me to take notes, because then once I have notes, I can sort of organize them and maybe send them back to you, and then you can put them in a graph or something more even
mhm.
point notes or whatever that you can then present to other people that are struggling to understand. The more so we can simplify these and put it into a cohesive sort of package, the more we can just be like, oh, you're interested, read this.
Boom. Yeah.
If you have
If
any
it,
questions, here's our number. Call
yeah.
us. We can answer some questions, but here's the basic rundown. There's a lot to go through.
Yeah. Do you have a business idea?
Yeah.
Click on this link. Do you have a friend who has a business idea? Get them to click on this link. Do
Are
you, you
you
know,
inheriting a business from your parents that you really have zero interest
right?
in? Click on this link.
Or something. We'll find people. We'll find them out in bars. We'll find them through word of mouth. We'll find them through referrals. We'll find them through the people that know people. Because once you get 100 people, or start getting close to 100 people, all of a sudden you can start like people start coming out of the woodwork. I know at least two different lawyers that might be a shoo-in for working in a cooperative in the legal department,
Oh,
and who would
excellent.
probably be willing to work for $20 an hour. And in addition to doing whatever the cooperative needs in terms of legal, would also be willing to do legal services for members of the co-op. you know,
Awesome.
uh, no, I don't know how law works, so that maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but it's a possibility. Um, and it would just be looking for, basically millennials or Generation Z people who are of the mindset where they want to work for a business where they're part of the ownership,
Yeah.
and they don't want to play the capitalist ladder climbing game, because it sucks, really.
It's fixed.
It is.
It's absolutely fixed, and nobody in the capitalist ladder climbing system wants to admit that it's fixed, especially the people that are trying to climb it, because
That's
they
where the
want to
money
think
is.
that they can get to the top. And why would they be part of it if that wasn't a possibility? It's like, well, I'm sorry to tell you, it is in fact fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Hate to
Yeah.
break it to you. Come join us. Get the hell out while you can.
Yeah. But while we still can, right?
Yeah.
And because as soon as Walmart can't turn a profit in this area, they're gone.
Yeah.
You know, as soon
And
as
then
we can't turn a profit in this
they're out
area,
of work.
yeah,
And
like
as
as
much
soon
as
as
I don't
what?
like Walmart, and yet I still guiltily shop there periodically because there's some things you can't get in town anywhere else, or I don't have the money to buy them anywhere else because I don't have that money. Um,
Yeah,
like there are people that work there that, yeah, it's,
that's the free market for you, baby. Ooh,
yep.
that's choice? Question mark? Hmm. Okay, so 10 businesses. We got 100 people. Like, yes, these 10 businesses. We incorporate, elect our board, and our core people. We figure out who's going to be the bookkeeper to start, who's going to be the accountant to start. Maybe they're the same person. The treasurer looks after those two people. Um, we probably start off by outsourcing legal services. We probably do HR amongst ourselves, because for the first business or two, we don't have to worry about that too much. But as we get more businesses, we'll be generating more revenue, which will all go into initially what's going to be what I was conceiving of as the big, huge general sort of pot that everything generates. And then from there, the board of directors ultimately, bless you, is going to uh, go with what all the businesses generate, and they're going to then budget everything aside. So everything is pre-budgeted for the quarter. So, and it's first month is all budgeted. So your every single hour, every single shift is covered. in terms of we expect that we're going to be open for these amount of hours, and so it's going to be required 2 people on at the site at any given time. So it's going to require cost us X amount to be open during that time, plus all the blah, blah, blah. We're going to have a budget, is my point, and the operating budget comes out of what everybody's generated that month. Whatever is left over, depending on how many businesses we have, will determine what the ratio of what gets put back into the capital fund versus what goes into the dividend pile.
Okay, so operating budget, because I'm taking notes, operating budget comes out of profit. So business
Yeah.
profit.
Yeah, well, of what's revenues. It comes out of revenues. Yeah.
Okay. Revenues.
Yeah. Yeah, what's left over after we do the operating budget is the profits or the surplus.
Okay. After that equals profit. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And then we then turn that profit back either into the capital fund, and it's on the ratio based on how many businesses we have of the 10 that are planted versus how many are not. So the if we have 1 business planted and 9 not, then we have 90% of that surplus goes to the capital fund and 10% goes to the dividend share. Once we get 2 businesses up and running, 8% goes to the capital fund, 20% goes to the dividend share. 3 businesses, 70-30, you get the idea.
Yeah.
And then as we start going along, we start introducing benefit businesses as well. So I've already kind of thought that the very first thing that we should have going, the very first benefit business that gets started right alongside the very first business, should be a childcare, which childcare for a business the size of one business, one business size, is incredibly easy to get started. I was talking with Sarah, who was might still join this call at some point, maybe. We'll see. But she teaches at Georgian child care services. Like she basically trains child care services workers. And yeah, so she's the right person to talk to about how to set up something like this with the government, and it's fun to talk to her about this kind of stuff because she just starts listing all this great stuff. I have notes from chatting with her about it, but it works out to basically 1 person for every kids, 3 kids for preschool kids. And then the ratios get a little bit larger for kids who are in school, and then kids who are in high school and stuff, you get much larger ratios and stuff. But we could essentially do an after school program as well as like I want to say a nursery because, I grew up in the church, but like a daycare program for watching your kids while you're at the work at the cooperative sort of service. So we would start that alongside the very first business day 1, and then just grow it naturally as need grows, and that would be paid for out of the operating budget. So and of course the operating budget comes out of the revenues, and it unlike the other businesses, it doesn't have to show that it's turning a profit. It doesn't have to break even. It just has to watch our kids. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Once we've got 3 businesses out and running, if we don't already, we should have like the best, benefits, medical benefits package that we can get. Ones that include mental health and all that other good stuff. We're talking the
Yes.
Cadillac plan.
As far as because I've had ideas. One of my ideas it was for a nonprofit. I thought they were like, if I ever got filthy stinking rich, or if I ever had any kind of whatever where I could create my own nonprofit from whatever, I really wanted to start like a farmland sort of mental health therapy retreat where you have people who are trained therapists,
Horses.
yeah, and have things like horses and gardens and woodlands and things where like people, they can live in, they can stay in their own cabin, or they can camp if it's warm enough and they feel like it. And there'll be like a big farmhouse that is sort of converted into like, there'll be like meditation and yoga and people that are willing to give like, you know, group therapy for some, or
Yeah.
individual therapy. And it's just like, but it's free to attend. And ideally, I would like to have a fund where the person, if they are working a minimum wage job and they're having a mental breakdown and they desperately need to get out of it, and they still need, there needs to be a way for them to not, you know, lose
Mm.
everything they have just because they had a mental breakdown. So if there was like some way to leave, like, okay, you had to leave work for mental health reasons, like there is the EI for health reasons, but I don't even know if they consider mental health.
They do.
They do? Okay.
They
If
do. I
somebody had
went
a
on
mental
it.
breakdown and was in the hospital kind of thing, and they were like, I want to take this retreat, EI would then maybe cover them. But if there was some other expense that they, you know, needed or something while they were there and they didn't have the money to do, we could have like maybe a fund that helped those people so that they could go to the retreat without there being any consequences to them financially for recovering, because that would, you know, that would undermine the effect of the retreat for starters. If you knew that while you were there you were losing, you know, the ability to pay for groceries or your family or
Oh,
whatever.
mercy. Yeah, right.
So, but basically the person talks to their boss or whatever, and they say, or their doctor, and they say, I want to go to this retreat, and it's completely free to attend. And we have people that work there that help them sort of recover mentally from it and put them through mental health programs, and they're there until they feel, you know, and you know, for a certain period of time, maybe like 1 week, 2 week retreats, and then they can go home feeling refreshed. So it's kind of
Mm.
like, you know, but it's one of those things that like, how do you fund something like that?
I got an idea.
Yeah.
You know, because something like that could be, and I'm reasonably certain that the auto workers union has a place, a retreat kind of like that out in is it Southampton or something,
Oh,
um,
okay.
or out in Port Elgin. Um, I don't know if they still own it, but I know they used to, and it's very much like that. And so, because when I was at the bowling alley, once a year during the summer, we would have every single last union kid or kids of people who worked for the auto workers union. They would all go to this camp in Port Elgin, and then they would come bowling at the bowling alley one day out of the
Oh,
week,
that's
and
awesome.
it was pretty awesome. I like them. And they would
One
just
of those
descend on
things
the
like,
place.
so it would, so it's funded by, that one's funded by a union.
Yes.
So for us, if we had somebody within our cooperative that needed to go to this place, obviously it would be sort of covered because they're already,
Hmm.
you know, they're already sort of looked after by the by our cooperative. Somebody outside wanted to go, because that's the other thing where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, so these auto workers have a place to go, where does everybody else go?
Right. So yeah, we would totally open. In my mind, every benefit business can also become a business as well, right?
Yeah.
So, and if in this case, where there's a demand for those kind of
Oh my
retreats,
god,
you know, right?
absolutely.
So we build it, we fund it. There will be people who will pay, you know, to come to be a part of something like that. And so we can open that up. We can create it so that, you know, for every 1%er who can pay to come, we have like 3 or 4 people who are on a list that can't pay who can come as well, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So we can set it
There's
up.
the I know there's a place out that does, it's this one's strictly sort of Buddhist. But my friend attended it, and she was basically, it's a silent retreat.
Hmm.
But its basic model is it's pay what you can. So
Sure.
people who have money, it's by donation. So if you can't afford to go, but you need to go, or you want to go, you could go and not pay anything. But if you can afford to, and people will pay hundreds of dollars. My friend, she saved up money so that she could pay hundreds of dollars because she knew a lot of other people couldn't. Um, so it's also like have donations run too, but that's if we are operating a 10100 cooperative with not-for-profit businesses that are funded by things, then we don't have to worry necessarily about overhead, but we can still have money generated enough to cover it so that it lessens the weight of
Yeah.
what the cooperative has to pay for.
Yeah.
um
And so the thing will be, for something like that now, because that's a big operation to be
yeah,
able to operate at a non-surplus, with a non-surplus mandate. So we would either need to figure out how can we afford to buy a ranch somewhere,
yeah.
and pay the taxes for that ranch and cover the cost of upkeep and all this other great stuff, because
As far as taxes go, if it's a non-for-profit organization, they might waive property
yeah.
taxes.
So I doubt we'll be able to operate as a cooperative with for-profit businesses in the cooperative and have nonprofit business
That's a
status.
separate entity.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's I would look into it, but as far as the
Yeah,
government would be concerned, every
they,
business is a part of the 10100 numbered company. So on as far as Revenue Canada is concerned, it's just one business. It's the cooperative, right? As far as we're concerned, we're 10 different businesses, right? Um, I think that's how that works, legally. So we wouldn't be able to have one business be for profit and one business apply
yeah,
for nonprofit status, right? But that having been said, we can decide that we don't have to run a business within ourselves at a profit if it's providing a benefit. The question is, uh, how do we still pay for it? Because buying a ranch sounds great, but how do we keep it from pulling down the rest of
yeah,
the businesses, right? So coming up with a business model that even though it's not for profit or a surplus mandated, it can still cover its own costs. Cool.
yeah,
Then everything is great. And so coming up with a strategy that allows for it to be able to cover its costs, and even if it does generate a little bit of surplus, hey, even better, um,
I think something too that, like, if you're a cooperative member and you want to work there, we can have it
mhm,
like it could be something that's set up where you're paid, but we could also have volunteer member off options for people who want to, like, if you want to go visit the farm, you can't afford to go necessarily to be like the patient or whatever, but
mm,
you volunteered for so many hours or something throughout the year to maybe to then we would comp you kind of thing if you were outside the co-op,
mhm.
or even within the co-op too, if you volunteered at the
Or put a dividend pip towards it.
yeah, if you put a dividend pip towards it or something like that, yeah, then that would help. And then you could have people, so if it's pay what you can, or it could be a work to pay exchange sort of thing. You could have people volunteering their time to maybe, like, if we have horse therapy or something, we could have somebody, the people that scoop the poop in the stables. Then if they volunteer so many hours or something, they can then take a retreat for a week sort of thing, and then be
Don't
one with patients kind of thing.
Yeah, don't forget we're going to have like a childcare system business at this point, that's going to have after school programs that are going to want to do things and have like trips and things
Oh
like this.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. Have
yeah,
the
it's,
kids, the childcare scoop the poop. Nice.
right. We can have like weekly events, weekend events, where members open it up to the public. We can have ongoing like weekly retreats that people pay to go, and then have weekend events. Where people like we can like back when I used to do church planting stuff. Like this was the sort of stuff that we would try to come up with.
Yeah.
these are the kind of schemes that we would try. Yeah. Um, so getting back to budgeting stuff, right?
Yes.
Because so we got the capital fund. So we got 100 people. We all agree that we're going to start these 10 businesses, and so we meet the first month. We bring $100. First ever meeting will probably be the large 100 corporate gathering, right? The next meeting will be amongst the businesses. So everybody will have their preferred business, so we'll get together in the 10 little groups and we'll bring our $100 at that meeting where we will, and then one person from each group will bring the money back to the treasurer, and the treasurer will then put that money in the bank, and then we'll have 20 grand in the bank. And then we come together again the third month, and we'll have 100 people this time, and we'll say we've got 30 grand in the bank. Do we have any businesses that we can start for 30 grand or less? And the answer is probably going to be no. Okay, not a problem. See you guys again in 3 months. And then the next month we get together in our groups of 10. We have a little party. We bring our $100, and then the manager brings it over on Monday, and we've now got 40 grand in the bank. Same on the fifth
Okay.
month, we got 50
For the
grand.
sake of notes, the third meeting, we get together and we determine whether or not we all have
Once a quarter.
Yeah. So for the third meeting is first quarter.
Yep.
Do we have money?
Do we have enough yet?
We have enough. Okay, and then after that?
Do fourth month, fifth month, sixth month, we get together again because it's now the second quarter. And we say, we now got 60 grand. Can we start a business for 60 grand? And we go, well, we might be able to start the tattoo parlor and beauty salon. And because that's going to cost us about 30 grand, a little bit more, maybe 40 grand. And the also because when we start up the tattoo parlor, we're also starting up childcare at the same time, and that's going to cost us 20 grand. So we got the whole thing. We'll say all packaged together is going to cost us $55,000. That's the budget to start up the tattoo parlor and beauty salon plus childcare. We all vote now. Okay. Does it pass, or do we want to be a little bit more conservative and wait, or do we want to get things started? Well, the sooner the better. So it passed with a margin, 2/3 margin. It's very very healthy. We just need a 50%, and we go with the tattoo parlor because the tattoo parlor, in addition to being ridiculously low startup cost, we just need a location, we need supplies, and the most expensive piece of equipment is probably somewhere in the vicinity of $10,000 to $15,000. So, or pieces of equipment, and then we get insurance, get a utility bill, and turn on the lights and start referring customers. So now everybody in the 10-100 is going to be referring themselves and their uncles and their cousins and their next door neighbors and everybody in order to get tattoos and body piercings and or the hair done at the co-op tattoo parlor and beauty salon. And our friend, say Rebecca. Rebecca's Pretty Green Hair Services is now part of the beauty salon, and so she's bringing in her customers, and she's getting paid $20 an hour, and she has a budget. She never has to worry about paying the lights or utility bills because that's taken care of. She just has to have customers and show up and do the hair, and she gets paid. And at the end of the month, she'll get a dividend check. Oh, well, at the end of the quarter. Well, maybe we'll figure that out because she's earning dividend shares because she's cutting hair. She works full time. She'll get another one. She's referring customers. Eventually, you'll cap out at 5 dividend shares. All of us will get a couple of dividend shares, and hopefully, we'll be making money hand over fist for the first month. So, oh, I mentioned before, the capital fund is going to pre-fund everything. So in the capital, the startup is everybody's first month of wages, with the idea that we're also going to guarantee the wages for month 2 and month 3. But we want you as the business to make money, make up the money that you're going to make for the second month. So that's what all this was all about, is writing up a sort of basic calendar with the idea that there are 4 weeks in a month. If we could, by the time day one, because everything's already paid for, we don't have to worry about making the money that we're going to pay ourselves this month. That's already set aside. We just need to start on day one of the first month making money for the second month. Set aside the money that we're going to need to buy the supplies, to pay for our hours, to basically be open in the second month. So month 1 is saving up money for month 2. Hopefully, we'll make up the money we need long before we get to the end of the month. Ideally, by the end of week 3, we've got month 2 paid for. So the last week in the first month, we're going to be starting to pre-budget for the third month. And so by the time we're halfway through the second month, the third month is paid for. Okay. Then from the second half of the second month to the first week in the third month, we're making up the initial capital that was put in for the first month. So we're making that back, which leaves us 3 weeks to generate as much profit as we can, because that's going to be the gravy. That's where the operating budget is going to come out of. And that's where we're going to pre-fund the next quarter out of. That's where we're going to pay for the child caring services out of. That's where we're going to pay for the bookkeeper out of. That's what we're going to pay for the accountant out of. The legal services. It's all coming from what we've been generating for these 3 months now. By the end of the month, we're coming into our quarterly meeting, where everybody's going to get together and we're going to get the update as to how well the business did this quarter. We're going to find out for everybody. Oh, sorry. We've generated all this revenue. We're now going to pre-budget we're going to propose a budget for the next quarter. So when everybody arrives, they're going to say, we generated this amount of revenue. It's going to cost us this amount of money to open up the tattoo parlor and beauty salon for month 1. So we've taken that and set that aside. Do we have your permission to do that? Do we have your permission to set aside enough money to open up businesses? And everybody votes yes. Okay, great. We move on. Or does anybody want to say that we want to vote on this sort of thing? Maybe streamline it so it's a little bit easier, less adversarial. Because if you give people an opportunity, sometimes they will take it. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I'm just thinking off the top of my head now. Anyway, point of the matter is, after that, we then get told the rest of what isn't going to the budget for the next quarter is what's left over. This is the profits or the surplus. So 90% of it is going into the capital fund. So all the $100 we've all been bringing, or the 10 grand that we've been bringing every single month since then. So it cost us 55. We had 60 in the bank. We started with 5,000. It's now 3 months later. We've now have 35 that we've been putting in, because we put in 10 grand a month. So that 5 grand that was left over after we planted the tattoo parlor is now 35 grand in the capital fund, plus 90% of whatever is left over from the business there. And when I calculated what the tattoo parlor makes, we could probably do it now, but it's $650 for a 4-hour session to the customer. 100 of that goes to labor. Say 50 of that goes to overhead. So that leaves us with $500 to as basically to the profit. uh, 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 well, putting towards stuff there. At any rate, add that up a bunch of times in a week with 3 tattoo artists. All of a sudden, we're making money hand over fist. It's great. Sorry, I'm getting a little discombobulated at this point.
You're getting far ahead too.
Yeah.
For the interest of people watching this video, to find out how the thing goes and how to get this thing off the ground, we are.
Oh, I think this is just a posterity video.
Oh, okay. Because yeah, I've got a bunch of notes. Yeah, I think we've got a good understand. Like I've got a good understanding, I think, of how this runs.
I mean, the business model is we pre-fund and then we catch up and then we divide the surplus after we've pre-funded the next quarter and with the budget. So the budget will be based on what the managers anticipate their needs are going to be. The board presents it, everybody ratifies it. We then move on to any new businesses we want to propose. Do we have enough money in the bank? Well, we got the 35,000 plus whatever the tattoo shop made. And we then vote on the next business that we're going to start, which may or may not happen in which will technically be the third quarter by this point in time. We might wait until the fourth quarter before we start our next business, but at which point we will have about 65 grand in the bank plus whatever surplus the tattoo parlor and beauty salon was able to generate in the meantime. And that could be an obscene amount of money. That could be well over 100 grand at that point, knowing how much money the tattoo parlor can generate in 6 months, a 6-month period. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I can send you my notes because I think we've come to a stopping point.
I think so.
My notes have the wrong thing.
Yeah, so the plan is to take this idea, condense it down into something that's easy to communicate. Sometimes I work on elevator pitches, but having something to point people to, especially with graphs, would be great. And then start having what do you call ongoing conversations with start inviting people to have dialogue, start inviting people to dream within this framework, because if we can get people to start dreaming within this framework, it'll just electrify and invite people I feel get attracted to that sort of excitement.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it worked great for Apple, didn't it? We can do something similar. Only we can actually empower workers, empower us all.
Yeah. Yeah. No anti-suicide nets for us.
Right. Oh God. Whew. Yeah. Can you imagine if every worker who built an iPhone got a share in the revenue, like more than
God,
just
right?
Right?
Get on it, Apple.
They'll never do it.
No.
But we might.
Yep.
So that's the beauty of the idea. So, okay, well, thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate it. I'm gonna try to do this again next Monday, hopefully with a few more people, and hopefully with a little bit more of some substance. I'll try and collaborate with some more people and maybe pull something together on the 10100 Facebook page, because that seems to be the starting point right at the moment.
Yeah. And have something maybe by the time we're allowed to leave our houses, we might have the game plan set and ready to go to just launch this.
Yeah.
When we can.
I mean,
and get
at
it
the
off the
end of
ground.
yeah, at the end of the day, finding 100 people, I'm not too worried about.
Yeah.
And every time I mention this to people, like, oh, well, good luck finding 100 people. I'm like, I haven't talked to anybody yet who hasn't been excited to want to be a part of something like this.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not too worried about finding people.
Do you
Um,
want do you want an alternative to capitalist corruption and not being able to pay your bills?
right?
Who would
Like,
say no to that? Except for the
how would
people
you?
benefiting from other people not being able to pay their bills. And
Yeah.
they're literally called the 1% for a reason. So,
Yeah.
everybody else, why wouldn't they be in on this?
Right? Because they don't know about it, and
Yeah.
because it's not easy.
Yeah.
And so my job is to make it easy
Yeah.
and make it something simple that's easy to understand, easy to do. So collaborating with somebody like Gavin to be able to form our own little social network that allows us to vote internally, and see the numbers. Like, because one of the things I like is the ability to kind of see where the money is going.
Yeah.
Keeps it honest,
Yeah.
and lets us all know if we made enough money to cover our wages today, and if we didn't, geez, what are we doing? You
Yeah.
know, because we understand, or at least we should understand, anybody who works a part of this, that if I'm not generating $100 over my 4-hour shift, I didn't cover myself, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's a real simple, easy way, like, to think, make $200 on your shift, you're good. Make 400, we're laughing. We're
Yeah.
all laughing, Um, and just have that as a
How much
simple rule of
money
thumb.
businesses make. Like the job I work at makes, like, on a bad day, they consider, oh, that's a really low amount of money, is $600,
Yeah,
and we're still being paid minimum wage. So what the heck's the company doing? Like,
yeah, yeah. Because what's minimum wage? That's
mean,
yeah. I'm trying to think, like, if how many of you are working for the day?
it's 3 shifts,
Three
so three
shifts.
people.
So it's going to be. Fuck, I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's probably, well, it'll be less than 600.
Hang on. Calculator. It's just $14 times. Oh, because it's open 24 hours. That's the other thing too.
Yeah,
So
make
it's
it make it
$14.
yeah, make it, instead of making it 14, make it 20, because that'll be represent the cost to them for having the employee plus overhead.
Okay. So 20 times 480.
Yeah. So yeah, just having, like, 3 shifts, covered, 600, eh, $200, or no, it's $100 profit margin. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not that great a day. you know, I can give them that. But yeah.
but it's still enough to cover.
Oh yeah.
And that's the thing. For a business that's open 24 hours,
Very
it's
true.
still enough to cover, um, and that's the thing, where it's like you're making more than enough. On a bad day, you're making enough.
Hmm.
So, and that's the other thing too, is as much as we always want to grow and increase profit margins for the sake of starting other businesses and growing the cooperative, we don't necessarily, like, oh, we need to create more money for the sake of creating more money. How can we exploit our workers more to make so that we can, like,
Well,
get away with this kind of thing? Like, because it would never, we could never get to that point.
it would just be amongst ourselves. It's like, how can we work harder in order to generate more? And it's just
Yeah.
like, that's the idea. It's like, if you, like, for your shift, make 200, we good. Make
Yeah.
400, we laughing. We
Yeah.
all laughing, right?
Is, like, it's common, despite the fact it's illegal. The general managers, and in fact, apparently it's a company-wide policy for the business I work for, that you're
Mm.
expected to show up 15 minutes before your shift and stay 15 minutes afterwards without pay.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that
that's
is
exciting.
like expected within the company. And despite the fact that's illegal, you shouldn't, your shift, like you don't do work until your shift starts. You're expected to show up. And it's like, okay, I get it. Get in the door and put, your uniform shirt on or something like that. That takes like a minute. Or if you have to change your shoes because you came in big winter boots and you don't want to wear them for your entire freaking shift indoors, fine. If that only takes a few minutes, but being
Yeah,
expected to come in and do like pre-work and then post-work,
yeah,
especially when you have to do paperwork and things like that after the shift, is like, that's not even legal. And businesses everywhere expect you to do that. Yeah, just about every job I've had, with a few exceptions, has expected that kind of thing, despite it being illegal. Like, that's a
geez.
normal thing for businesses to ask. And they think that if you have a problem with that, that it's, like, well, it's an industry standard rule. And it's like, it's an illegal
Yeah,
industry standard rule that none of you should be applying. Like, what are you doing? So
they
that's
can
the
ask,
kind of
they can
thing that,
ask, they
like,
can't
employers
demand.
expect from things, like, how do we exploit our workers kind of thing. It's not even a case of like not paying them enough. It's these stupid extra little side things that
Hmm.
they try to get their employees to do, that to increase their profit margins.
Yeah.
um that is like, no. How about no? Like,
Yeah. How about no?
and if we're working as a cooperative and everybody votes, then that kind of rule, if they're just like, yeah, well, how about everybody just start early without and not get paid for the first 15 minutes, you'd get voted down in a flash. Like, no, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not working for free.
No.
The hell kind of era do you think this
It's
is?
like, and or the thing is, you're working with five other people, close friends, and you're like, okay, the store needs to be open tomorrow at 8. I'm gonna show up 10 minutes ahead of time or whatever. Someone else just like relieve me 10 minutes ahead of whatever. It's like you guys will figure it out amongst yourselves.
Yeah, if
And
somebody needs
and
to leave early, then they can maybe, like, okay, you can have, or like they can balance it out where it's like, I have need to leave early, so tomorrow, I will stay late so you don't have an extra 10 minutes, and that makes up the difference. Like,
mm,
it's doable, and it's a common thing that people do anyway. Because let me tell you, as soon as there isn't anybody in charge to enforce that 15-minute early, 15-minute late rule, workers don't stay and they don't
no,
show up
why would
early.
they?
When, yeah, exactly, it's like, yeah, okay, I'll do this, and then they just don't, because there's nobody to tell them, why weren't you here earlier, why didn't you stay late? Because why would they, unless
I mean,
somebody.
what's the benefit to the worker? They're not getting paid to do it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. They're
I
barely
mean,
getting paid enough as it is for the hours they are paid. Why would they stay extra hours?
well, because they want to become a manager.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a really good way of figuring out who's going to be willing to play the game. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's not worth it.
oh, they will make it worth it. 70 grand a year, 90 grand a year, 6 figures a year. They'll make it worth your while.
Yeah. But, like, and like, I'm one of those people where I have been a manager before, for financial reasons, not because I wanted to. And I
Hmm.
didn't enjoy necessarily being a manager. I could do it. It was okay. I didn't hate it. But I didn't, when I was a kid at school, I didn't think, when I grow up, I want to manage a Taco Bell. Like, that's no kid's dream ever.
Right?
So, like, it's not like I was passionate about the work. It was a job that paid my bills, and that was it.
Hmm.
But that's
Interesting.
the thing, that
Did,
like a 10-100 sort of, like, if you get voted in as manager or something, you're already working for a company that you believe in and you really have faith in and care about.
hmm.
Nobody's doing the job just for a paycheck, which means they're all going to put more effort into doing it.
Yep.
They're all going to care a lot more about what they're doing if they actually care about their job above just if I don't have a job in a place. Like, I hate my job, but I stay here because I have bills to pay. How many lazy workers are out there because they hate their jobs apart from the paycheck they take home?
Yep.
And even that isn't enough, so they're just like, why do I care? Because they have no reason to care.
Yeah. And in this sort of thing, they're like, by virtue of the fact, like, you have a stake. It's democratic, by its very nature. Not only do you have a stake in the say of how things go on, you get a benefit. When
Yeah.
when we all do well, you have a hard decision to make. Like, do you go up to the next tax bracket, or do you keep that money invested back within the cooperative?
And that automatically increases the service to the customers, because
Mhm.
so many people working in service industries now, they're so put upon and taken advantage of that, like, oh, I could become a manager of a business I don't give a crap about and put in the extra effort and stay late after my shift because something money. Or, in our model, they give a crap, like
Yeah.
it's if you actually care about what you're doing, you put more effort into it, you do the job well. You're not like, can I go home without mopping the floor? I actually want the floor to be clean, so I'm gonna mop it. You don't even need to be forced into it like you have to force teenagers as a Taco Bell.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I have work experience.
Well, that's all right. But you, like, working at the Taco Bell, the kind of obscene amounts of money they make, like,
Yeah, they make an obscene amount of money, and the people who, without them, they have no business, make diddly squat. It's
yes,
like,
there it
you know
is.
what? You realize you think you're the most important employee because you made a couple decisions in a year, so you're making billions of dollars. But if you don't have somebody to make the tacos,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't have a business at all. So who's the most valuable employee? Think about that. And that's,
Hmm.
I think, something that that everybody having to stay home and businesses close and everything during this pandemic is proving too, is that without the people on the ground floor of a business running the business and generating the money, the people who are supposed to be the most important, the 1% employees sort of thing that are making the most money, sorry, you're not the most important employee. We could easily run the business without you, and we'd probably be doing better for it.
In fact, we're coming up with a framework to do it without them.
Yep. Yay.
My tail is wagging. Yeah.
Viva la
Yeah.
resistance.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, Laura, you are awesome. Thank you
You're
so much
also
for
awesome.
having that conversation here today, and I look
Yeah.
forward to having it again next week.
Sweet.
Alrighty. There's a stop.